Hello. Uh, Let me get this screen share up. Cool. Well, hey everyone. Welcome to this live webcast of bots versus apps talk. Can everybody see my screen right now? I should have a Chrome window that's being broadcast. And then you should see something big that says that says bots versus apps. If somebody could type into the feedback box whether or not they could see this, that would be great. And then we can go ahead and get started. Well, okay. Let's just go ahead and get started then. I'm gonna assume that people can see my screen and hear me, and let's go from there. So, hey, everyone, welcome to my talk about bots versus apps. Who am I, and who is giving this talk? Well, my name is David. I work for a company called Dexter. Dexter is a visual platform that allows people to build. Uh, to build apps and easily connect services online to build interesting things on the web. Okay, great, you guys can see this. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. And so today I'm here to talk to you about kind of like this revolution in the sort of like app creation sort of space, what it all means for you, and how you can leverage this for some of your marketing tactics out there, right? And so that's a brief overview of us. And then so we're here today to talk about bots. Bots are hot right now. You might have heard a lot of people talking about the bot phenomenon. All these sort of like platforms out there are launching sort of like ways for developers to build bots. You see this Forbes article here about Facebook launching its bot platform on Messenger. But it's not just Facebook. You have other companies who are literally giving money to people to build bots. There's a sort of like a bot war going on right now. Like everyone's trying to get into this bot space, and then soon you start to realize that there's so much happening in the bot space right now. And then this is what we're going to try and demystify today, using a lens that I think everyone here should be familiar with, which is apps, right? So we're going to talk about bots and going to try and compare and contrast them with what we already know and are familiar with, which is apps. And so before we start talking about bots, let's take a brief detour and chat about what we know about apps so far, and what they do, how people interact with them, and some of the economics, and how people actually create these things, right? And so think about your favorite app. Maybe it's Uber, maybe it's like Slack on your phone, maybe it's Instagram, or what have you. Now let's think about the entire category of apps as a whole. So when you go into any app store, whether it be on your iOS device or Android device, when you go and download one of these things, they're going to present you with a list of sort of like categories that apps fall into. Now that's a good categorization of sort of what apps can, what sort of like niche they fall into. But let's think about apps from a functional standpoint, right? What do apps actually accomplish, and what are their functions, right? So this is kind of like a gross simplification, but I think that many apps out there fit into these sort of categories that I've brought up here, right? So one category is information retrieval. Like think about your news app, your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed. This is really just information retrieval, right? Like you want to read news, maybe you want to see directions of how to go somewhere on Google Maps. Like this is all just presenting information on your phone, and it's very one way, right? It's like show me some information. That is pure information retrieval. Another sort of basic functionality that apps provide is information storage. Say you have a note-taking app, or like you want to sync your photos on your phone to Dropbox. Really, what it is just information storage, right? Like you're giving this app some information, and then this app is then storing it in the cloud on some servers, what have you. Another piece of functionality that the apps can accomplish is interpersonal communication. So this is your email client. This is your chat client. This is how you talk to people that you work with and know in everyday life. And then we're going to come back to this a big category later, obviously. And then we have the sort of like games out there, and then multimedia consumption like YouTube, music, podcasts, what have you. Like this is kind of how I see most app functionality break down. And so let's remember what these 5 things are, and then we're going to revisit them later. And so let's move on from functionality of apps to apps and like their interface and their interactions. Well, first of all, for most apps, before you can even do anything, before you can even take advantage of the functionality that the app offers you, the first thing that you have to do is you got to log in. You got to sign up. You got to think of a new password, a new email, what have you. And then this is the first gateway of entry to the vast majority of apps out there. And then after this, finally, you can start interacting with apps, right? And so, what is one of the most fundamental interactions that you can have with an app? Well, it's just reading content the app has on the screen for you, right? Like think about your the last couple of apps you've used on your phone. What was the core function of what you did? What was the core interaction that you had with this app? Well, I'm gonna guess that it was mostly around you reading your screen and consuming content that the screen presents you, right? And so think about scroll through your app history and think about how much of what you were doing with these apps is purely reading content that was presented from this app to you. And now, what are some other things that you can do with apps? Well, sometimes they will present you with a predefined list of options to choose from, right? When you go to Yelp, you're going to want to choose like, okay, like find me places around me, find me a bar, find me a restaurant, what have you, right? And so a lot of these apps have very specific siloed pieces of functionality that they expose to you. Things like read the story, show me places nearby. Maybe you'll like a picture on Instagram. And then, so this selecting from a list of predefined options is another sort of like functionality, is another kind of interaction that you can have with an app. And so what's going to happen when you tap on one of these things, or what's going to happen when you select from one of these predefined options? Well, you're put back into a loop again, right? Like you're just going to like be reading more information, you're going to be consuming more content. The app is just going to simply present you with more information, right? And so what is this really like, right? It's kind of like you're like tapping around, tap, 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 show me more of this photo, how about to read this piece of content from the New York Times, what have you. And so really we have this loop of, tapping on screens, giving input to apps, and then the apps coming back and presenting you with more information, right? And so this is a very basic loop that I like to call and a response, right? And so you tell the app what you want to see, and the app simply returns you information about that. This is a very, very, very common paradigm out there. And so let's call this call and response, and we're going to come back to this at a later point. And so let's move on from apps, interactions, and functionality into development, right? I'm sure this is something that we're all familiar with, right? What do we need in order to build successful apps? And so we need to hire a CTO, we need to hire engineers, we need to hire product designers, we need to hire product managers, right? This list goes on and on and on. The amount of resources and the amount of capital required to just get an app off the ground is very, very high, right? Just think about all of the knowledge that your entire team has gained, basically since college to the point that they are now. This is a lot of time and effort and money that needs to be invested in order to build an app. And now let's think about the economics of apps. There are some fun kind of like monetization models out there, but I would say that most of them sort of break down into two broad swaths, especially when it comes to the mobile era. You can charge users directly to use your service. Pay me $10 a month so I can watch a content on Netflix. Or the other common model is you charge your advertisers for your users' eyeballs, right? So you are Procter and Gamble, and you want to promote your new shampoo on my site. I have a lot of eyeballs. Give me some money. Here are the eyeballs. And so that's how most of the economics around app development really break down. And so that's kind of the overview of apps so far. I think we're all sort of familiar with these mechanics and how development and how the economics and the business side of things really work. And so now let's move on from apps while we have that fresh in our heads into bots, right? And so as I said before, everyone is kind of talking about bots right now, and then and so bots can actually mean a lot of different things. For the purposes of this conversation, let's think of bots as conversational interfaces, right? So let's strip away things like artificial intelligence, voice, things like that, and let's think about just purely as you're consuming content in a threaded sort of like back and forth messaging interface, right? Anything you are reading with a bot comes in a messenger form. And so now let's break down everything that we thought about for apps. Well, let's think about them for bots as well, right? Actually, just to get everyone on the same page, let's go over two of the examples we see on the screen here right now, just so we really have a good understanding of what bots actually are. So the thing you see on the left here is a H&M bot inside of the Kik platform. So Kik is a messaging platform that's popular with a lot of teenagers out there. And so, in addition to scrolling through your friends list, you might have your friends from school, you might have your parents in there, in this same list of people, you're going to have bots as well, right? And so H&M is one option of somebody out there that you can talk to. And then so, as you can see here, the H&M bot, the screenshot here kind of shows like a basic information collection, sort of like part of the app, right? So it's asking, do you want to see men's or women's clothing? Like, who are you, right? And so this interaction is happening within the Kik Messenger itself. The screenshot on the right here is from an app named Penny. This is a personal finance sort of like tracker helper app out there that allows you to see things related to your finances, in this conversational form. And so now, hopefully, everyone has a good idea of what we mean when we say a bot. And so now, moving on, let's take the same lens that we viewed apps through, and let's apply the same sort of analysis to bots, right? And so, what are some of the bots' functionality, right? Well, let's go through each one of the 5 things that we brought up previously. And so, 1, information retrieval, right? This is what bots do really, really well. Think about the SMS app on your phone. Think about the whatever popular messaging service you might use out there, WhatsApp, WeChat, things like that. It's just this service out there is going out there grabbing information, which happens to be, messages from your friends and family, and displaying it to you, right? And so this is what bots do very well because of the medium that they occupy. And so information storage, it's very easy to tell a bot something and then have it remember it just like an app because it's powered by a backend, right? So from this Kick app example, right, like this H&M bot is going to remember that I'm a male. It's going to remember my age so that the next time that I have a conversation with H&M, it's going to know who I am and automatically be able to recommend things that I care about. And so interpersonal communication, bots can really make make this a lot better. Imagine you are on a team chat and then you want to without even leaving this chat, you want to be able to save a new event to your calendar, or you want to be able to assign a to-do item to somebody else on your team. Bots can help facilitate this functionality. Like entertainment and games, there's already a lot of new development in this area. Some people are creating these sort of choose your own adventure style games, which lends itself very well to this conversational format. And then some more advanced platforms out there actually allow you to play, real, multiplayer games on their platforms. And then obviously multimedia consumption, bots can help facilitate this pretty well as well. And so let's go to the interface. There's not much to talk about here. It literally is just call and response, right? This is the exact same paradigm that we said that apps exhibit, right? Really, it's bots present you with information, you tell it something back, and then there's more information, tell it something back, more information. This is the exact same call and response paradigm that most apps out there have. So this screenshot on the right here, actually, this poker bot was something I alluded to earlier, which is, this is a bot out there that allows you to really play poker with people inside of a chat room, right? And so with the explosion, with the sort of a renaissance that's happening around bots right now, there are all these sort of new creative ways that people are starting to interact and build on top of these messaging interfaces. Now, let's think about what I left out when it comes to these interactions, right? The fact that I left out was that users on these chat platforms don't have to download a new app to interact with a brand or with a personality, what have you. And so let's think about the H&M example, right? How would H&M have collected this information previously, right? So the information here is, are you male, female? What's your age? This is very valuable information to H&M. And so in the old world, call him Joey. He's a 15-year-old kid in high school. Joey would have to either log on to H&M.com. He would have to download the H&M app, and then sign up. He would need to drop in his email address, things like that. This is a very heavy touch way to collect this sort of information. And the advantages that bots give us is that these things already are living on a platform where there's already profile information and you can interact with these users directly without having them to sign up or download a new app. And so one thing out there that's very surprising is that the number of global monthly active users on messaging platforms have surpassed that of social networks, right? And so this happened right around late last year, where there are more people in the world right now using messaging apps than there are on social networks. So imagine the value of creating a Facebook page versus creating a bot on Kick, right? It's starting to become evident that in the future it's going to be more beneficial for somebody to create a bot on a messaging platform versus a page or a Twitter account on some other social network, right? And so let's think about development of bots. through the help of certain tools out there, including Dexter. The act of creating a bot is much more simple than creating like a whole new app, right? So what are some key hires you need here? Well, you need a content producer, you need some copywriters. These are the people that actually write the copy, write the actual words that go back and forth between between the user and the entity or in the bot. And then you might need a designer to think of a logo or something, and then probably a very, very, very a much smaller engineering team, if you need them at all, to help you create this bot. And lastly, okay, actually no, here's an example, right? So I'm not sure if you guys remember, but last year there was this great campaign by Oscar Mayer, who built an app out there called Sizzle. This was basically Tinder for people who like bacon, right? There's a big splash in the press about this sometime last year. And so think about all the effort that Oscar Mayer had to go into. They had a contract development team. They had to actually build it out. They had to test it. In addition to things like writing copy, designing the assets, things like that. And so think about how heavy touch this app creation process was, and think about how much easier this would have been if Oscar Mayer just had decided to create a bot instead and then launch it on, say, Facebook, as opposed to having its users download a whole new app and then interact with it that way. And so that wraps up development, right? So when you compare and contrast bot development with app development, bot development is much, much, much simpler because all you really need is to design this very simple text-based back and forth interaction between your bot and your users. And so when it comes to economics as well, basically the same things, or like it will be the same things. Like you can charge your users directly inside of an app. Inside of a messaging platform. Many of these platforms, in fact, already have built-in ways for you to charge your users. And then many of the platforms aren't necessarily there yet, but soon they will most likely allow advertising to happen on their networks as well. And so your advertisers are going to love you for having these bots because, up to, almost half of all millennial smartphone users actively use messaging apps right now. And so that is kind of like a good overview of what bots are. And so now, just to drive this point home a little bit, when it comes to bots and apps, is really bots are very much the same thing as apps, right? They have the same functionality and they have the very much similar, same like interaction and like economic paradigms as well, right? It's this very, very basic kind of like tap, back and forth, call and response pattern that you see across both apps and bots. And now bots are, have some advantages to apps. Most likely, they're much simpler to build. The audience is already there. They don't have to sign up or create a new account on your app. And this app, his audience is young and highly engaged, and so when it comes to apps versus bots, I think that it really should be apps equals bots. Apps are bots and bots are apps. And so let's talk a little bit about Dexter. Now that we have this understanding that bots and apps are very similar things, and so, you might be thinking to yourself, how can I go about creating one of these things myself? And so that's where Dexter comes into play. Dexter is a way that allows people to build, to build apps, for lack of a better term, but to build apps very, very simply. And so, as I've just said, like when it comes down to it, bots really are apps, and bots are a very, very simple form of app, right? And so right now, Dexter is focused on creating tools that allow people to build not only apps easily, but bots very easily as well, to allow you to launch and deploy these bots onto platforms that you already know and care about. And so on the left here, you see a kind of a mock-up of the existing Dexter interface and like how you build apps right now. On the right is a very, very, very special sneak preview of what's coming up soon from Dexter, which is a very specialized, script editor that allows you to build and deploy bots very easily. And so let's talk about some things right now that have already been built on top of the bot creation tools that we've launched out there. There's something out there called Homie, which was created by a real estate agent. This is their lead capture bot, right? So you might see signs out there for homes for sale, and then you might see some phone numbers on these signs. Instead of calling in this number and talking with an agent or most likely reaching a voicemail box, Homie signs say, hey, text this number now, and then interact with our bot. And so just like how H&M was able to gather information like what's your age, what's your gender, this real estate agent out there, through his bot that he created on Dexter, this real estate agent is able to collect information about his prospects and about what sort of like homes that they're trying to find, price range, things like that. There was another bot out there that was called Botline Bling. This is kind of like a parody of like a Drake, if you will. This was created by a Onion writer, and so it's as if you're texting with Drake directly. You might have seen this in the news a couple of weeks ago. And then, finally, we've seen a lot of people creating these sort of like personal bots, right? Like these personal agents, if you will. And so Sandy McBot is the personal bot created by the founder and editor-in-chief of something out there called Quib. And so what do you notice about these things and about what people have been creating on Dexter is that you don't need to be a developer in order to create these things, right? We have a real estate agent, we have a writer for the Onion, we have the editor-in-chief of an online magazine, right? These are all people who might know how to code here and there, but they're not super well versed in how to write code, and Dexter has already enabled them to easily build bots. And so that is mostly it for my presentation. I'm going to launch into a quick demo of the Dexter platform, but now might be a good time to queue up any sort of like questions or comments you have in the Bright Talk feedback box. Alrighty, so let's just come over here to Dexter. And so this is a bot we launched out there called Spreadsheet Bot, or more accurately, this is a bot generator we've created out there called Spreadsheet Bot, right? So this is a bot that allows you to create a bot. This is something on Dexter. This is a tool on Dexter that allows you to create a bot and launch it to Slack with using literally just a spreadsheet, right? And so let's walk through this process and see how easy it is. And so first step, you got to open up. Let me try to open this in a new tab. You got to open up the spreadsheet, and then this is basically going to be your bot's brains and your bot's guts. Let's make a copy of the spreadsheet, and then let's call it for Bright Talk. And so now I have my own spreadsheet here, and then what I need to do is I need to copy this mess of letters up here. Come here, click use this app. I'm gonna go in and authorize Slack, okay. And then so I need to choose what team I wanna launch this bot on. I'm gonna launch it on the Dexter team, and then hit authorize. And then inside of here, I need to paste in the slug I found here in the URL, paste it in here, finish. And now, without doing much, I have a bot on Slack already, right? You can come here, and then you can find it. Let's see, it was called demo spreadsheet bot. There will be some back and forth here already, but let's take a look at our script here, right? And then so when I type in, say, for example, time, this is going to give me back the current date, right? So what is the time? I'm talking with my bot, and then it is going to respond to me with what time it is, right? And so let's see how easy it is just to add new things in here. So come here, I had a row, and so say now I want to find something whenever somebody mentions Bright Talk. And then the bot's response is going to be, I think Bright Talk is amazing. And literally just added one row to a spreadsheet, come back here to your bot, and then say, hey, what do you think about Bright Talk? And then it should respond with, Bright Talk is amazing. There we go. And so now you see that we have created a bot without writing a single line of code using something that everyone is already familiar with, which is a spreadsheet interface. And so that is the brief demo that I wanted to run through. As I said, teasing a little bit, there's going to be new special tools coming out soon that allows you to create these things even more simply. But the best and greatest tool we have right now is this spreadsheet bot that a lot of people out there are already using to create these bots for themselves. So thank you for your time. That's my presentation. And then let me see if there are any questions here. All right, let's go through some of these. How do you think people will use personal bots in the future? What is their practical use? So imagine, so maybe it's better to think about these bots as agents and not just bots, right? So imagine, maybe a nice way to think about it is it's your personal assistant that's living in the cloud that you can talk to via text as opposed to, a bot, right? That's another way to kind of like frame what a bot is. And so, imagine, so because bots are inherently connected to the internet, they can accomplish many things that you can already do, right? So for instance, say you wanted to save something to your calendar, for like a meeting tomorrow, all you need to do is text your personal bot saying, hey, can you remind me of this meeting at 3 p.m. tomorrow? And then because your bot is connected to the web already, can do that very easily. And so this kind of fits into Dexter's overall thesis as well, because we're all about connecting services on the web to allow you to accomplish useful things. And so maybe, there is some sort of like vanity aspect to having a personal bot, but it might be more useful to think of them as a personal assistant, as a personal agent, as opposed to like a back and forth conversational bot per se. Can a bot stand alone, or does it need to be part of an existing platform/app? The answer is kind of both. Bots can stand alone in that you can have a SMS bot. So if you're in the US and you can text US numbers, you can text any of these two numbers I put out here right now, and then you can interact with it directly from your phone without needing to be a user on Facebook, on Kik, online, or anything else, right? And so these bots take advantage of the SMS platform, and so the answer to that is both, right? So obviously, when you go to a Kik bot, you're going to see a lot more functionality in terms of like structure of buttons, setting photos, and things like that. But you don't necessarily need to be on one of these platforms if you launch your bot with a simple phone number. Let's see, what chat platforms do people prioritize to build a chatbot on? Yeah, so in terms of like deciding what platform to launch your chatbot on, I mean, I think it really comes down to your users, right? And so say you're an existing company, say you're an existing brand that wants to utilize bots as this new channel to engage with your users with, right? And so really think about where your users already are, right? And so there's a large amount of material online that you can read about the sort of breakdown of users across these platforms, right? So, Kick, as I said, was popular with US teenagers. You mentioned WeChat, obviously that's very, very dominant in China. So if you have a large Chinese audience, maybe think about launching a bot there. WhatsApp actually doesn't have a chat platform right now, but maybe they're going to launch it soon. And then obviously, if you have a large audience on Facebook already, you can turn your existing brand page into a bot very easily. What do you think of Tay, Microsoft's accidental neo-Nazi millennial bot creation? Yeah, I mean, like Tay was definitely part of that craze around bots, everyone is kind of like getting into the space right now, and that's kind of why we're here talking about it. And so what do I think of that? I think that Tay is more about, is more of a lesson around, exposing how much of your, exposing too much of your logic to your users maybe, right? And Tay doesn't necessarily, detract from the fact that it's a conversation interface. Tay was more about, what happens when I do machine learning on the web, right? And so and so you learn that there's a lot of trolls out there. Let's see, next question. Does the conversation with your consumer happen in real time, or do you set up automatic answers ahead of time that get sent out automatically when certain keywords are in the message received? Right, so the way that this spreadsheet bot works is that you're typing in your script here in column A, and whenever the bot recognizes some input from your user, it's going to see what row that text matches, and then send the response in column B, right? And so if there's anything that the bot cannot recognize, that's what this last line here is for. So you can change this to find out more at rundexter.com, right? And so something that this thing cannot recognize is, say, let's call it David. And then David is not in this list of column A, and so it's going to come back here and then send me find out more at rundexter.com. So that's part of your question. And then the other part was, does the conversation with your consumer happen in real time? There are definitely tools out there that allow you to sort of like defer conversations to a real human, right? So Dexter actually has another app out there called Smack, which is a SMS spreadsheet bot, but with backup by humans, right? So how Smack works, it's very similar to how a spreadsheet bot works, except instead of talking with your bot over Slack, the entry point to your bot is over SMS. So that's very similar to the Drake bot or the Sandy's bot. So you're texting with your bot. Your bot is looking for canned responses from your spreadsheet, but if this bot cannot find the appropriate response in a spreadsheet, instead of giving the default response here, what Smack does is Smack routes this input from your user to the bot into your team Slack directly. And so somebody on your community team can then interact directly with the person who is sending your bot text. So it's a spreadsheet bot with human backup. Let's see now. Is the platform built on Slack or is its own bot solution? So Dexter is not built on top of Slack. Dexter has connections to Slack that allows you to launch Slack bot. Currently, we have support for SMS, Slack, Facebook, and then we are working on Kick and Viber as well. And so let's see. Nice. Keep it simple. Interface. Get people using it, and then get people MVP all the way. Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Collecting information. Can it collect and manage things like personal trading goals? Yeah. Funny that you mentioned that. Actually, we had a personal trainer out there trying to create a bot to motivate his clients, right? So he created a bot that allows them to basically like get motivated every single day to like do a routine, right? And so he came to Dexter to create that app. And then when it comes to collecting information, yes, you absolutely can. You're going to have to go into the editor on Dexter a little bit to play around with that. And so this is something I haven't showed off yet, but this is kind of like the heart and core of what Dexter is. It's a visual interface to build apps. Like, and so if you want to save any information from your users, you might have to go in here and dig around, or in Spreadsheet Bot, you have logs here. And so you can always track what your users are saying via this. Let's see. Have you done any experiments with tone and style in building spreadsheet bots? Are they friendly, moody, sarcastic? You know, like a lot of things on the internet, you know, tone, style, copy, they all depend really on you know, really on the brand or the entity that you're trying to represent, right? So for example, you know, this bot like Bling one is going to be very, very funny and sarcastic. Homie is going to be more you know, sounding like a professional real estate agent. There's another one out there called cake.af. This one is super flippant. You know, you text an emoji to this number and you get sent an Uber to, you know, basically take you to some random ass bar out there. And so depending on your audience, you know, you can, you know, change up your copy to be whatever it is. And then when it comes to, you know, designing the actual conversation, you know, I think that the more deliberate and the more specific you can make your prompts, the better results that you can get, right? Like one of the advantages, but one of the, so a conversation interface is almost like a double-edged sword in that you can open it up to anything, and then it's really about the bot being smart enough to respond to whatever might be thrown at it, right? And so maybe err towards the side of being a little more, so like if you're requiring input from a user, say like a name or an age, you know, be very, very specific about that, right? Instead of asking, who are you, a better thing for your bot to say might be, what is your name? Or, you know, how old are you? You know, this way you can draw out much more specific information from your bot's users. Can you give an example of how an auto dealership might use a bot? Sure, right? And so let's think about the fundamental business, you know, aspects of what happens in an auto dealership, right? So one thing that a dealership does is that you know, customers come in, they view cars, and then the salesman job is to keep in touch with this customers for as long as possible, right? So you can imagine, instead of the auto salesman giving this potential buyer his personal phone number, they might give this buyer, you know, a bot phone number, and then this bot can do one of many things. You know, it can respond to things like, oh, has this car been taken yet? It can say, you know, what are some other options? And finally, it can take advantage of something like Smack, where if there's no sort of like preset canned responses, the car salesman can text directly with the agent itself. And then you can imagine a lot of sort of like lead gen and lead capture use cases as well, right? Instead of, you know, saying, you know, view my website, you know, to find out more about this car, you can say, text this number, and then we'll give you updates about this car as it develops, right? Which industry do you see being disrupted the fastest by chatbots? This is an interesting question. So when it comes to like which existing sort of industry, like I go back to the sort of like form and functionality and the interface of chatbots, right? Like what sort of apps out there really like specialize in and do well in this sort of like back and forth, text, reading and delivery sort of interface, right? And so definitely I think like media is a big one, right? And so there's an app out there made by Quartz. I think I had a screenshot of this a little bit earlier. But this Quartz app is delivering content purely over SMS, right? And so definitely media is one of them. Another huge one is probably e-commerce. We see multiple examples here already of brands allowing themselves to interact with users directly and do things like capture information, maybe even sell them a product and use the existing sort of like app credentials saved to these platforms. Can bots interact with each other? Yeah, sure. Why not? Right? These are all on the internet, and then you can definitely imagine two bots talking with each other. Although I'm not sure why exactly you would want to do that. And then, do you have a favorite bot? I love the Drake bot actually. It's really cool and really funny, and it really shows the power of it's a great interaction. It's a great intersection of like humor, showcasing what bots can become and showcasing what Dexter can do to help you build bots, right? And so this was a dude, like he's literally a writer for The Onion. He hasn't, probably written a lot of code in his life, and he was able to come to Dexter, realize his whole messaging craze right now, and take advantage of that without even learning how to code, right? And so that's probably one of my favorites. And so now Bright Talk is telling me that I'm running over, and so that's it for questions as well. So it works out perfectly. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in, and you can find out more at rundexter.com. My handle on Twitter is Octopi, and join our Slack. Absolutely. If you have any questions for us, we keep this open Slack channel, and definitely come in, jump in, talk with us. We won't bite. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and have a good rest of your day.